a lot more about her actual story, but I did want to give her a brief introduction. So Marinelle Ubaldo is one of the leading young female climate activists driving change in Asia. She's an advocate for climate justice and environment issues. She's also been a really vocal figure and change maker in the Philippines, and has been involved in collaborating on the Philippines' nationally determined contributions, their NDCs, to implement a conference of youth at a local scale. She's also about to serve as the country coordinator for the Philippines at the upcoming UN Climate Change Conference of Youth, COY 16 in Glasgow in November. And she has the most incredible story to becoming a climate activist. Her wisdom and experience, I think, is invaluable, really, and we're so lucky to get to spend time with her. So let's all welcome Marinelle. As always, please save your questions for the end in the chat, and you can. I'll be facilitating the Q&A via the chat right after we hear from Marinelle. So let's just all welcome her and say hello. Welcome, Marinelle.
Hello, everybody. So glad to be with you all. I have been seeing a lot of people coming from different places, and it's really good to come to see all of you here. So today I will be sharing about my advocacy, my story, how I get into this kind of advocacy, what are the challenges so far that we have that I have encountered in my advocacy. So hi again. As mentioned, I am Marinelle Ubaldo. I am a 24-year-old climate activist from the Philippines. I am currently working as the Advocacy Officer for Ecological Justice and Youth Engagement for Living Laudato Si Philippines. It is an interfaith movement initiated by Catholic lay people calling on the Philippine financial institution to divest from coal-related operations and also other environmentally harmful activities. And as mentioned, I am the country coordinator for UN COI 16 Glasgow that will happen this November, just prior to the COP. So I hope to see some of you there. If you're going to COI or COP, that would be really amazing. Just give me a message and I would really be glad to see you all there. I grew up in Matarino. It is at the end of a peninsula that is facing the Pacific Ocean. So our island is really facing the Pacific Ocean. That makes us one of the front line to every other disaster. I have found memories of a happy childhood, playing on a white sand near the beach, on the shore of the coast facing the Pacific Ocean. I grew up not worrying about food since we are living on the coast with abundant produce, and also my father is a fisherman, so he would just get fishes from nearby, and then that is the fresh fish is the food that we will be eating for the day. He did not need to sail far to catch fish. The ocean has always provided for us. Growing up near the Pacific Ocean on the coast, I have been used to typhoons, and it's nothing new to me. Our house has always endured every typhoon, and we seldom need to evacuate, not until Super Typhoon Haiyan happened. Just to give you a brief idea on what is Super Typhoon Haiyan. Super Typhoon Haiyan was the strongest typhoon ever recorded in human history, and it landfall in our area. It killed a lot of thousands of people. It devastated a lot of communities and a lot of livelihood, and it felt like we went back to zero. So I just want to tell you uh, a short story about what happened during Super Typhoon Haiyan. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning on November 8, 2013. So it was almost 8 years ago. Everyone is panicking as the winds became more intense, and we wanted to evacuate again because there might be a tsunami. The night before Haiyan struck, we had no more electricity. So together with my whole family, we were already at the evacuation center, which was only 10 meters away from our house. I only brought an encyclopedia with me so I can just read until the storm passes. My bag was only filled with my phone, my charger, notebook, and pen, and I didn't bring any clothes with me because I thought we could just go home immediately when the storm subsides. It has always been that way, and never did it cross my mind that we will have nothing left of our home, but only one-fourth of its flooring and about three of its columns. We did not really know what the storm surge meant until we experienced it ourselves. At that time, storm surge was a very new topic, a very new term for us. And unfortunately, it wasn't contextualized in our context, so we would understand it. So we didn't really know what the storm surge was back then. I saw a woman carrying a child who almost had her head cut off because of the chia sheets blown away by the strong winds. And I couldn't fully describe what was happening at that moment. There were plenty of families with their children rushing into the seek refuge in our evacuation center because the evacuation center they were in got destroyed. So the roof, the windows, and the doors of the building we were in got also destroyed, and many of us get injured because of the broken glass windows and flying debris. And there were so many people died in our village, including our neighbor and some people that we know. I personally know. I went back to our house even though the winds were still strong, as I wanted to see if we have a home to go back to. Although it was still dangerous for me to go back at that time, but I wanted to save the box that has a sentimental value to me. And that box was very special to me because it was filled with my personal things, my literary works, the certificates and medals I earned in schools, and other recognitions that I got before. For me, that box symbolizes who I am, my achievements, my self-worth, and nothing was left of our home. And losing that box felt like losing my identity, my dreams, my significance as a person. Because I would always go back to that box whenever I feel down and whenever I feel low. And that always lifts my spirit. 3 days after Hayan, we were left in isolation. We had nothing to eat but cassava. We had no food, we had no water, we had no electricity, we had no secured shelter, and we had no change of clothes. So we were just all wet and cold. I was so confused of the and devastated of the reality I was facing. And at that time, I was only 16 and was about to graduate high school. I wasn't even sure if I could graduate, let alone continue my college education. I lost my books, my uniform. How can I continue studying when my parents cannot afford to send me to school anymore because we lost our livelihood? For 3 months, we weren't able to go to school because it got destroyed. And March 2014 came, and we needed to fast track all the lessons so we could graduate by April 2014. After Haiyan happened, it seemed like my future even became more uncertain because my parents did not earn enough to send me to college. Luckily, I was able to get a scholarship for my college education and was able to work by facilitating trainings in climate change adaptation and mitigation. I had no choice but to do that so I could sustain my needs, especially because our fishing livelihood stopped for months. My father's boat was broken and there were no fish to catch. We couldn't also bear the thought of eating fish that may have fed on the dead bodies of the neighbors and the people we knew. My father had to go to sail to other places just to go fishing, but he would end up with little to nothing. And there was a huge depletion of fish catch after Haiyan, and it made surviving even more difficult. So that was in 2012, actually, when I first learned about climate change and disaster risk reduction. At the age of 15, I became a child facilitator and I had the opportunity to visit remote communities and schools to educate people about the causes and effects of climate change and the measures necessary to adapt and mitigate its effects. 7 years, almost 8 years later, my nerves still get the best of me whenever I hear the crash of the ocean waves. I get anxious and restless when it rains because I fear that another Haiyan will happen again. It took me 3 years before I was able to go into the ocean again. And it was sad because the ocean was our childhood friend and I grew up with it. It has always provided everything we needed. But now, whenever we look at the ocean, there's always fear because We can never forget how it took everything away from us. Super Typhoon Haiyan was the strongest typhoon ever recorded. If climate change continues, the Philippines will be experiencing more and stronger typhoons, and not just even the Philippines. It would hit a lot of vulnerable countries around the world. And it would not just affect the Philippines, but all of us in the world, because we are all connected. Super typhoons will become a normal phenomenon. And it would mean that my children, your children, will live their lives surviving super typhoons and other climatic disasters. These experiences motivated me to do more. Sharing has been the key to healing for me, because I realized that climate change is not just an issue of adaptation and mitigation, but also an issue of human rights. This is the start where I started lobbying with the government, delivering talks around US, Europe, and Asia. And in 2015, I am very proud to say that we have submitted, along with other grassroots organizations like the fishermen, the farmers, the indigenous peoples, and others, a landmark petition to the Commission on Human Rights in the Philippines to investigate 47 carbon majors for their contributions to human rights violations linked to climate impact. And in 2018, I have served as a community witness during the public hearing in New York. And in September, I am one of those who did a lone protest in front of the Shell company in Bonifacio Global City here in Manila. I called I called them out to face the people. And finally, after 4 years of battling with them, we have won. And in 2019, during the COP25, it was announced that the result of the first in the world climate justice petition can be a legal basis to sue these big corporations, because yes, legally they are legally liable for human rights violations linked to climate impact. Now there is already a legal document that we can use to really get the justice that we deserve when we call out for climate justice. And this cannot be just be used by the Philippines. It can be used by a lot of vulnerable countries around the world. Um, and for human rights, we are nearing the justice that we deserve, and we want the carbon majors, to acknowledge that their responsibility for what they have done to us and to my community and to other vulnerable communities around the world. But these, sad to say, these companies didn't even show up in any of the hearings conducted, and they did not have the decency to hear the stories of people who have suffered because of their business practices. And my international engagements give me the opportunity to be exposed to different environments, allowing me to experience working and networking with people from diverse backgrounds and understanding different ways and approaches that organizations do to help young people become a catalyst of change in their own communities. And my global campaign with Amnesty International on Right for Rights gathered almost 600,000 support worldwide through organizations like Plan, Greenpeace, Amnesty, Living Low Advocacy. I was able to represent the voices of the youth and the marginalized at the COP and COI. And for this year, I am set to attend the pre-COP, the Youth in Climate Driving Action in Milan, and COI 16 in Glasgow. Also, together with my three friends, we have founded the Youth Leaders for Environmental Action Federation. That is a youth-led organization based in Eastern Visayas. So the organization partners with different youth organizations in communities and schools, and we give mentorship because we really think that it is now our time to give mentorship to the youth and to those organizations who are just starting up, because we came from there. And then we give also training to other youth organizations on where and how they could start with their advocacy projects and programs. And we are the first organization who organized the climate youth strike in Eastern Visayas. We have also submitted a petition to the city of Tacloban, and that is the ground zero of Super Typhoon Haiyan, to ban single-use plastics. And we have lobbied with different city council with a policy on banning single-use plastic. Those are just some of the things that we have achieved so far, and we are continuing. However, our government in the Philippines has long been deaf to the outcry of its people. And even in COP25 in Madrid, no one from our government has brought the voices of the Filipino people in the negotiation table. And in 2019, the Philippines is the third most deadliest country to be an environmental defender, according to the Global Witness. I saw the hopelessness the typhoon had caused, the struggle of my community and my family, and the loss and the destruction. And I have seen death. I realized that we should not just accept being vulnerable throughout our lives. We should not accept being only victims, because we have the power and we have to do something. And I do not want my family and my community to suffer again that way. And now you can see more and more young people are fighting to reclaim our rights to our future. There should be no such thing as a climate youth activist. Yet here we are, here I am, and there are thousands of others like me, like us, who have led a life of activism, not by choice, but by necessity. And I am here talking to you not just as a climate statistic you see in the news, that you can see like survivors, thousands of survivors. I'm not just one of those climate statistics. I am here as a human being, hoping to remind everybody, all of us, that we need to value lives again. And climate justice for me is giving justice to those who have perished because of climatic disaster. Because no amount of climate denial or apathy can resurrect the lives of our loved ones. But I hope to awaken the minds of those most vulnerable for climate change, of those who have the greatest capacity to act and change the current system for the protection of vulnerable communities everywhere. To you, my fellow youth, never underestimate your power to make a change. If you're thinking that you're alone in this journey, think about those people, thousands of people across the world who are doing the same individually. If we could do it collectively, that would create a bigger impact. This is perhaps the beginning. We still have a long way to go. We should not stop, because the future depends on our decision now. And people say the youth is the future, but we fail to realize that we, the youth, we are the now, we are the present, and it is only fitting that we take action today, because the future begins now. The future begins today, and now is the time that we, the youth of the society, have to dream and work for a future, and we must always sustain the resistance. The youth should be involved in identifying and creating solutions to social issues, because at one point our voice should be heard. Youth always have to be part of the decision-making processes, especially on things that involve and concerns us. It is our right to be consulted, because our ideas matter. In the future, it will be us who will be leading countries and solving complex problems. And it is just right that we get to practice that as early as now. And it is very important to advocate for divestment of coal. And let's call for divesting of the hazardous coal and invest in our green future. We should divest from activities that harms communities, that kills Filipino people and people in vulnerable countries, that destroys livelihood, farms ecosystem and marine biodiversity, and invest in green technology that save not just lives, but the earth as a whole. And if you know, in his encyclical letter, Laudato Si, the care on our common home, Pope Francis said, we have to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice and debates on the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And my story is just one of many stories out there. And I'm here to speak on behalf of the vulnerable and marginalized communities. And I hope you could learn something from me and my experiences and my story. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, thank you so much, Marinelle, for sharing your story. It's really wonderful to be able to hear from you. And I know that everyone is going to have lots of questions. I also would love to welcome now Jamie. Jamie Margolin, who is joining us, I think, from New York. You'll let us know. Yeah, I'll just give a brief introduction to Jamie, and we'll hear Jamie's story as well. So Jamie is a Colombian American organizer, activist, author, public speaker, and I think also a film and TV student. She's the co-founder of the International Youth Climate Justice Movement, 0 Hour, that led the official youth climate marches in Washington, D.C. and in 25 cities around the world during the summer of 2018. She also helps to lead 0 Hour in organizing marches, rallies, educational campaigns, strikes, summits, tours, lobby days, also including the 2019 Youth Climate Summit in Miami, Florida. She has also served as a surrogate for the Bernie Sanders 2020 presidential campaign. She spoke at several campaign rallies, and she did a lot of outreach to get the vote for Bernie Sanders. She was also one of the youngest delegates at the 2020 Democratic Convention, Youth to Power, Your Voice and How to Use It, is her debut book. And she's the ultimate guide to being a young activist. So welcome, Jamie, and we're so excited to hear about your work and your story. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. So do you just want me to share a little bit about the work that I do? Okay, so hola a todos. Hello, my name is Jamie, as introduced, and I'm really happy to be here over Zoom with you all. Like you said, I'm a climate justice organizer and activist. I'll just tell you guys how I got started and what I've learned from my time in the movement. Climate anxiety, or the general psychological fear of the climate crisis and grief of the destruction of our planet and what's happening, because that genuinely causes real pain, real grief. That's always been something that I've felt ever since I was really little. When I was little, I've always felt the damage of the climate crisis, and I've always been aware of it. There was never a moment in my life where it was like, oh, wow, I'm just learning about climate change. Like, people always ask me, when was the first moment you heard? And I'm trying to think, and I can't remember, because it was literally always been a part of my life. I'm 19 years old. I was born after 9/11. So I grew up in an era where the climate crisis has always been a reality. And so having this anxiety, a lot of times my way of coping with it was just sticking my head in a hole like a ostrich. I think it's a myth that they do that, but just the idea that of just trying not even to think about it, not wanting to do anything. Whenever there would be like an NPR interview about climate change on the radio, I would turn it off. I would switch the channel. I didn't want to hear about it, not because I denied it or didn't believe in the cause, but because it just caused me so much anxiety and so much existential dread at like the pit of my stomach that I just couldn't handle it. It's such a vast reality to handle. Like it's such an destruction on that global scale that feels so out of our own control, because yes, we can do our own individual actions and do activism and take action, but there's only an extent of control we have. The rest of it is out of our hands, even if you're doing everything you can. And so that helplessness really bothered me and overwhelmed me for a while. And that's why I didn't even bother. But then in the 2016 election rolled around, and I was 14 years old at the time. I was a freshman in high school. And I felt like I really wanted to do my part to keep a president that I felt was a terrible climate denier and just all around awful leader out of office. I wanted to prevent the election of Donald Trump. And I saw him, his campaign rallies, his speeches, and I was like, oh my gosh, this man cannot be president. This is horrible. And so I got an email in my inbox that was how to join a local campaign headquarters in Seattle, where I grew up, was opening their offices to volunteers. And I thought, great, I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to do that. So after school, this was my first year of high school when I was 14, I would go to the campaign office and do as much work as I could, make calls, try to train people. This was the Democratic headquarters. So it was trying to elect Democrats up and down the ticket. So at that point it was Hillary Clinton and then everyone down in the ticket that year. And I was just doing my best, doing everything I could, attending events, training people. I served as a Spanish translator because I was the only Spanish speaker in the office. And so if ever there was a call that came into the office from someone who couldn't speak English, it would go to me at 14. And so having that young age, I felt like some sort of purpose at the campaign office because I was working towards something. I felt like I was taking action. And then the election results came in, and spoiler alert, even though he did not win the most votes, the American system of electing presidents is absolutely messed up because we have this thing called the Electoral College. So Donald Trump became president, and that absolutely broke me. It was grief, honestly, and it was so scary. And I remember election night, it was horrible. It was one of the worst nights. And for a while, I just was too overwhelmed and sad to even act. I mean, I went to the Women's March and I went to like other rallies and events, but to continue my work, like I didn't even know where to go. But then eventually I kind of got over that paralysis of anxiety. And I decided to join a local a local climate justice organization called Plant for the Planet in Seattle that was led by local activists and community organizers, and they had a bunch of other youth organizers doing great work. And so I had a community. And so I just went to a meeting. I attended the meeting, and then I attended another, and then I went to this lobby day in the capital of Washington State in Olympia. I skipped a day of school and went to lobby to try to testify for different bills, to get different bills passed locally. And at the time I was pretty naive, and I thought, like, here I am, I'm going to take climate action, and we're Washington State, we're a blue state, everyone's like Democrat mostly in the legislature, like it'll be fine, we can pass things easily. And that was not the case at all. All of these bills that we were working on passing, none of them passed. And I grew very frustrated because all of this hard work I was doing, it was my first year of high school, I hardly had any semblance of a social life. I was just between managing schoolwork and doing climate work, that was all I was doing. And so I felt like I was sacrificing a lot and not even seeing any results. Nothing was changing. And then the summer of 2017 rolled around, and that was really just a grand culmination of so many awful climate events. There was the Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and that really hurt because even though I'm Colombian, the first Latin American country that I've ever been to is Puerto Rico. And it was with my mom, and that was the first time. It was in 4th grade. And before then, I was very resistant to speaking Spanish. I'm first generation, so I was born in the United States, and my mom came from Colombia, and she spoke Spanish to me. I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose my Spanish. And I would just want to speak English and not really appreciate being Latin American and not appreciate speaking Spanish. And then going to Puerto Rico and seeing that I was a part of this greater Latinx community, and that knowing the language gave me a sense of like, oh, I don't know, that sense of pride and camaraderie. And that was kind of when I stopped trying to be ashamed of being Colombian, but be really proud of it instead. And so I just had such great memories with my mom in Puerto Rico. And so seeing the devastation on TV, it was really heartbreaking. And then in my home city of Seattle, the smog from wildfires, both in Canada and in California, blew over our city, covering us in a thick layer of smog to the point where I was getting migraines and just really bad headaches because the air quality was that terrible. It looked like it was cloudy, but it wasn't clouds. It was smog, and the air felt heavy. And there were points in time where Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, we're known for being like crisp, clean air, evergreen state, was had worse air quality than Beijing, China for a couple days. And some of the worst air quality in the world for a couple days. And that was absolutely terrifying. And it was in that moment that I had this idea stewing for a while that I was going to start a youth climate march, because after I saw the way that the No Dakota Access Pipeline mobilization of people taking action and mobilizing and galvanizing people, and the women's marches, I was really enthusiastic about the power of mass mobilization. And I really wanted to make a massive youth climate march, and I wanted to make it happen. And I was 15 at the time, and I had no idea how to do it. But at that point, I realized that we were at a climate breaking point. And so I posted on social media, I'm going to start a youth climate march. Who's with me? And it's not like, oh, and then it went viral and the rest is history and it was great and it was successful, boom, done. No, like 20 people saw it. It's still on my Instagram. You can scroll all the way down and find it, that initial post. But there was this one girl named Nadia Nazar from Baltimore who reached out and said that I want to take action. I have no idea how to, I've never organized anything before, but I want to make this happen with you. I'm an artist. I could make the logo. I could do the designs. And then I was at the summer program at Princeton that summer, and I gathered a few other youth that I met there, Zanaji artists and Madeline too, and they became co-founders of 0 Hour, which is, we named the organization 0 Hour because we have 0 hours left to act on the climate crisis. There's no more time. And so we got together, we built this organization, and from the summer of 2017 to the summer of 2018, we built and built and built and organized the youth climate marches in 25 cities around the world. Now, the day of the march, it was actually complete torrential downpour of rain. Like I'm not saying, oh, like it rained a little, oh well. I'm saying like we were getting flood alerts on our phone that said, do not be outside. It is like flash flood warning. Where it feels like buckets are being poured on your head, that was the type of rain. But people still came, and I was crying and I was devastated because I was like, we worked so hard on this and no one's gonna come. But people still showed up in ponchos and just marched through the rain like soldiers. And it was like it was just this incredible emotional experience of and that there are pictures from that event. You can Google 0 Hour Youth Climate March of us with our banner with the paint literally dripping because of the rain. Well, only one of them dripped, but still, and with like fists in the air and marching in the rain. And it was a full circle moment because the activists that I had looked up to who started the No Dakota Access Pipeline fight were there. And some of them were like, when I was complaining about the rain, I forget exactly who said this to me, but that was just people kept saying at the thing, water is life. Like, and when it started pouring even more, people were like, water is life. Here we are. We're gonna go with it. And I started out really like sad and bummed and annoyed because of the rain, but then it ended up being just this almost transcendental, like not spiritual, but just very powerful experience. And the photos and the impact that those marches had after was immense. And a couple weeks after the Youth Climate March, Greta Thunberg started striking, and then the climate strike movement started, and then we got involved in that. And then the youth movement has just been building and building. And I, throughout all of high school, was on the forefront doing as much work as I possibly could. And I wrote a book, a guide on how to be an organizer and an activist for people, because I was getting a lot of questions like, how do I take action? What do I do? I don't know how. But also at the same time, I was neglecting some different aspects of my life. I was neglecting being a teenager and having fun. I was neglecting my family often by being away. I would be gone for different parts of the country or the world, or just gone as in I'm in the house, but I'm on my computer emailing people all day, or I'm always working. And it had that impact where I didn't even get a moment to pause and think. It was just go, 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 go. And I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like I have to do everything because, we don't have time to act on the climate crisis. And for a very anxious type A person like me, an issue like the climate crisis is a disaster, especially because you feel the deadline just keeps getting worse and worse. And so you keep getting more rushed, and I would stress myself out. I would burn myself out. And it wasn't until COVID hit, and it had a really devastating impact on my family. I lost my grandpa to COVID, and throughout the pandemic and going to college and just going through life, and I guess adulting and growing up in such an uncertain future while doing this work, I've had to come to terms with learning that there's more to helping stop the climate crisis than simply just overworking yourself as an activist. There's also, we come from the earth, we're 70% water. So taking care of ourselves is an act of taking care of the, even if you're like not a spiritual person, just scientifically, we like ourselves are come from the earth and this planet. And so actual self-care is something that I've learned. Actually spending time in nature. Like I would get so focused on protecting it that I wouldn't even go out and spend time in it and go outside. And this past summer, I've spent a lot of time just actually appreciating and learning from nature and taking a minute to slow down. And that I have this global community of activists that are doing amazing work. If I'm tired, I can rest and they will keep the work going. And those are some of the lessons that I've learned from the work that I've done, and that there's a way to go about this work without burning ourselves out, and that we have to take care of each other and understand that climate anxiety and climate grief is very real. It's not, if you have found yourself at some point like crying when you see a horrible climate disaster or getting really viscerally scared. I mean, here in New York City, we had the hurricane and then the hurricane fallout. I got caught in the flood. It was really scary. And it's easy to fall into that immense depression and that immense, it's almost not even climate anxiety anymore. It's climate depression, because it feels like anxiety implies worrying about a future possible event. Climate change is here and it's already killing people, and it's affecting people. It's affecting my family and my family in Colombia. My uncle has a farm and it got flooded, and they're still working on recovering from the damages because of all of the environmental damages that are happening in Colombia. And so the best way to combat this grief is, yes, with action, but also with taking care of ourselves and each other and community, and working in collaboration, not competition, and helping each other out, and being in communication with our global family of activists and knowing that we have each other's back, because it's still scary, but at least we're not alone. And yeah, those are some of the lessons that I've learned in my work. That's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Jamie. Really grateful for that message. I'm seeing lots of clapping happening in the Zoom. Yeah, so grateful to hear that message about staying connected to the natural world and taking care of ourselves and each other. That's really important. I'd love to open it up at this point for everyone to send their questions in the chat for Jamie and Marinelle. I think you actually know each other, right? If I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Jamie?
I don't like
we
at some
have
point, but we don't talk often. Like no, we don't.
Okay.
But it's wonderful. I heard part of your speech and it was amazing, and the work you do is awesome. So
I think we were together in some of the speaking engagements before.
Yeah, I think that's where, like, I looked at you and I'm like, she looks familiar, but yeah, definitely looks familiar. I've seen her, but I was like trying to figure out where and I couldn't. So yeah, probably around, because yeah, it's the climate action family. It's a relatively small world, so we see each other.
Yeah, that's so true.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to check in and see, because yeah, I see questions coming in here, and you know, some of them are specifically directed, but I think some of them, if either of you feel like you also have something to offer or want to speak to in answer to that question, please feel free to also jump in, because I know you have you both have a lot to share, and I'd love for this to just be a kind of an open conversation. And I'm gonna call on students to ask their questions so that you can actually hear their voices. And so when I call on you, please will you just say your name, where you are, and then just ask your question. Okay, so we'll start with, let's start with Daniel. Daniel, would you like to unmute and say hello?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Daniel Dayon. I'm from Benin. My question is addressed to Jamie and Marinelle. Given your background and experience in terms of youth involvement in decision-making process, what advice could you give to a young activist who would also like to bring the voice of his community to the international level? Thank you.
That's a great question. It's so nice to meet you. I'd say my first advice is to gather a group of like-minded individuals if you can. If there are other people in your community who also share a goal, like I'd say first is solidify your vision. Like, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to accomplish? So for example, for me, what I wanted to do was I wanted to organize a youth climate march. And my goal with that march was to raise as much awareness and pressure and demand action from our government. And so then I had that vision, and then I shared it with different people who I shared it on social media. I shared it with like different people in my community and people that I knew and around me. And the people who shared that vision with me and who saw it and were like, oh, I like that, I want to make it happen too. Then I brought them in, and then we started to work together. And then we were like, okay, how do we actually make this happen? Let's work backwards. A backwards timeline is great. Let's say working backwards from the day of the march. What are all the things that we need to learn and know to get there? And so we think, okay, well, we need to raise money. We need to learn how to do that. Okay, someone will be in charge of learning how to do that. Okay, we need to learn how to organize and reach out to other people in the environmental movement. So one of us is going to do outreach to other organizations and try to find mentors. And okay. And so you just kind of see what you don't know, what you know, and what you need. And then you start to just make it happen, set a timeline. That's also really effective. For me, I work well under timelines. So if you say we want to, and make it something both ambitious and realistic, so that there are goals that both push yourself, but also you don't want to set yourself up for failure by doing something that you know isn't feasible within a certain time frame. So you could like set a deadline. So for example, if you want to organize, I'm just going to use the example. If you want to organize an event or something, what's the deadline? By what time realistically will this event happen? So that's just some advice that I have.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. I think I'm going to go to Vittorio's question. I think that's a really good one and relevant since. Go for it.
Hi, yeah, thank you both for your speeches. They were super inspiring. I wanted to ask, since like Marinel talked about COP21 and 25, I feel, and Jamie has been involved with activism for so long, I wanted to ask, like, since COP26 is approaching, I think in a couple of months, what do you expect from it? Do you think that is the last like chance or opportunity for us to do something, or like what do you expect from the next COP?
As for me, I am really expecting to have an inclusive and equitable COP, as what the UK presidency wants it to be. But there are so many restrictions around, and there are so many GOP that is at place. Not everyone could go to COP, even those from first world countries. How much more those coming from the global south? Not everyone has the capacity to go and raise their voices. And as much as how important their voices are to make the COP equitable and inclusive, they cannot just go because there is no funding available for them. And that is just one of the challenge that we face coming from the global south. Though we are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis, there is no much opportunity for us to really get involved in the negotiating table or in the decision-making processes of the climate summit, just like COP. And I really want the though there are initiatives of the UK presidency to really make it more inclusive, just like funding the quarantine hotel for people coming from red list country. But still, there is a big gap, and for this COP26, we do not want to have a COP outcome that is dominantly, we don't want to have a COP that is dominantly produced by global north. That is the thing that we fear about, especially now that a lot of people that I know who really has something to say in the negotiating table won't be going there, because they thought that they are fighting for the cause that they want. They are fighting for equitable distribution of vaccine, not just for the delegates, but for the entire world. Unfortunately, there are a lot of world leaders who are still hoarding vaccines, and a lot of people in the global south and in the poor countries are still struggling to get vaccines. And there are rich countries who are, having all of those vaccines and not sharing to other people and other countries, I mean. And I just hope, as much as we want to hope for the best for the COP, but there is still a lot of uncertainty and doubt, especially with the representation. And I am very lucky to be there. I am very lucky to be able to have the opportunity and to be funded to be there, because not everyone in my circle, not every climate activist that I know who are very inspirational, who carry a very powerful message, can have the opportunity to be there. But for me, I want to maximize that opportunity to really carry the sector, the voice of the sector that I want to represent and the community that I want to represent in the COP. Yeah, so we really have to be hopeful, because I think we don't have any choice but to be hopeful, so that our world leaders will really come at a decision that is a win-win for everyone, and most especially for those in the vulnerable countries, because we don't have any more time, as the IPCC report has pointed out.
Thank you for that, Marinelle. I think I would love to hear Philip's question. I think it's really interesting.
Hello, everyone. I'm Philip from Macedonia, and my question is to both Jamie and Marinelle. So if you could choose anything to happen to reduce the risk of climate crisis, what would you do, or just delete that permanently from the planet?
I would delete colonialism, because that's what got us in this problem in the first place. That's the root of the climate crisis. So if that is deleted, and those practices and that mindset and that extractive way of living and existing is deleted, then we're good. I mean, obviously there's more to it, but that's a great start.
For me, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
For me, I think I would delete, the greediness of people, the narcissism of people, because maybe our self-centeredness have put us in a way that we want to oppress other people for our own benefit. And that is maybe something that we should think about when we do climate action. We are not just doing that for ourselves, but for other people. And if you do harm for the planet, you are not just harming the environment you're living in or that certain area. You're also harming a lot of people in other side of the world, because we are all connected, and whatever we do for the environment, it comes back to us 3 times or maybe 10 times.
Thank you for those answers. Annie, can we hear your question, please?
Hi, Marinel, I want to say that I feel really, I identify myself in your words, because for me, the climate change is a justice, is a political issue. And in the south of the planet, we have a lot of problems to the people here, us, especially the indigenous, the farmers, the Black people. they didn't have the possibility to be heard, and they have a lot of solutions for the environmental problems. So I want to ask you, what strategies have you used to be listened to, because the people hear you? I want to know, how did you get that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really believe, I really do believe with what you said, that people from the grassroots, so those farmers, those women's organization, farmers in the grassroots, they have always something, they have a remarkable idea on how they could solve the crisis or the issues that they have in terms of the climate crisis in their own communities. And I always advocate for them to be in the decision making table, for them to be always consulted in whatever decisions we do for the community, especially if it affects and involves them. Because as like government agencies, a lot of big organizations just go to the communities and say, like, you should do this because this will solve your issues. We should not do that, because in the very first place, those community people knows what are the issues in the community, and they know what are the solutions to the issues that they have, and they are the first people who you should learn from in terms of making such climate actions. Because I really do believe that they have the power, and they have all those amazing ideas how they could innovate. And surprisingly, when I go to communities, I see a lot of innovations already. But they need to be funded, they need to be supported by the government and the bigger organization, so that those initiatives on the ground could be sustainable. And as what you have asked about, how did my voice have heard in the international level, I think this is in relation to earlier's question. I think in global south, there is no much opportunity to engage. There is no, especially here, I'm talking in behalf, I mean, in the context of the Philippines, there is no such avenue to really be involved. And you really just have to really go on and register to volunteer organizations and other organizations that gives you the capacity to learn more and to be trained on this field. And then you can get your small community of activists, because people that you will really rely to, they will be your great support in this climate activism. Being a climate justice advocate is very disappointing sometimes, and it gets like, it is very frustrating, it gets a lot of energy, and sometimes you just ask yourself, are you even making any difference? Are all those efforts that you have made, are even making an impact? But then you have to go back to your why are you doing this? What is your greatest motivation why you have even started? Then you will recenter again your focus, because at the end of the day, it is what you are fighting for that matters. It doesn't have to be grand, and it doesn't have, you are not everyone's cup of tea, and you will not be not everyone will be pleased by what you are doing. But it is important to know that what you are fighting for is very important, that is beyond yourself, that is for the world and for the next generation to come. So just go on. I didn't plan to be like this. I didn't plan to be heard. But when your passion just drives you to really make change happen, it just, people will really feel the passion that you have, that the feeling that you are trying to convey to other people, the energy that you want for them to feel. Because we really have to convince everyone that we should be all in this together, fighting collectively to solve the climate crisis.
Thank you so much for that beautiful answer.
I also just want to shout out, it made me really happy when I saw a location that I saw that Anya is from Bogota, Colombia, because that's where my whole family, well, a lot of my family's from other regions, but that's where my mom is from, is Bogota, Colombia. And so that made me really happy. Also just emphasizing that, that people on the front lines do need to be in the rooms where the decisions are made. And it's very frustrating when leaders again and again who do have the power to listen, like for example, here in the United States, there's a battle to stop Line 3. Line 3 is I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the Dakota Access Pipeline and the fight to stop, where indigenous communities in the United States came together to fight to stop the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Unfortunately, because of the Trump administration, it did end up getting constructed. And so the fight to stop Line 3 is, again, indigenous communities resisting modern day colonialism continued, and fighting this pipeline. And Joe Biden, if he felt like it, if he just woke up and felt like it, could sign an executive order right now. He just could to stop the pipeline, and then we wouldn't have it. But because a couple, those at the top, those in power don't, that it feels very frustrating, I feel like, to be at the whims of, like, to know that there are some people who, if they just felt like it, could make the change that people are fighting for. And it's so important. That's why to get people on the front lines and people who live this work and live the solutions to have a voice. And with COP coming up, I don't think I'm going to be able to go with university this year. I'm not able to miss school, and I've actually never been to a COP, but I would like to go in the future. But something very frustrating is that it's a lot of those conferences are funded by the fossil fuel industry, and COP has a lot of fossil fuel investors, and often the voices listened to at these conferences in the long term are not so much the frontline voices, but the voices of the fossil fuel industry. So we also have to work on getting polluters out of the COP system as a whole. And I encourage everyone to follow my friends, Aisha, Helena, and Isabella, all started this organization called Polluters Out, which is pressuring. It's an international coalition. There are branches in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, like everywhere. And they are fighting to pressure the United Nations to not let these fossil fuel people make the decisions when it comes to climate action. They shouldn't have a say. So I'd encourage everyone to go support that.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for that. I think we have time for just one more question. So I'm going to hand it over to Maria, who asked a question pretty early on.
Hello, I am Maria Paula. I am from Colombia. And my question is, what will you suggest to someone who wants to start learning and training process in activism, climate justice, and climate action? Thank you.
My biggest suggestion is to just get started and not worry about it being perfect or knowing everything. And also, yay, another person from Bogota, Colombia, yay. I have, you don't see right here, but I have a little batch of Colombian flags hanging on the wall. But, entonces, mucho gusto. But I'd say, like, a lot of people worry about, like, okay, I have to know everything. And while it is good to like prepare yourself in some way, waiting for the perfect moment is never going to come. There's never going to be a perfect moment in your personal life, oh, I'll just get through this thing that I'm going through. Obviously, if you're going through a lot, then take a break, but there's never going to be a perfect moment. So just start. And the best way is to find a collective that already exists and learn from people. And then later, like, I would not recommend just starting your own thing. I mean, if you do want to do that, that's great. But what I did is I first joined an organization, then I saw a need that existed. And then when I had the skills and tools from doing it, because the best way to learn is to just do it. Then when I had those skills and tools, I went out and started my own initiative, but I didn't do that until I learned from others, and I continue to learn from others. So I know there's a lot of great organizations in Colombia doing so much great work for different aspects of protecting Amazon, or for indigenous rights, or there's a Fridays for Future Colombia chapter, and a lot of other Colombian climate initiatives that I would recommend. With social media, it's super easy to like follow the organization and send them a message like, hi, tell them your name and a little bit about yourself, and be like, I really want to get involved. Do you have any meetings coming up? Or and you just send a couple messages to different, attend, you don't have to commit to something, but just start to get in that world and meet other like-minded people, follow other activists on social media. And because activists and people on social media will post events, and you can, oh, I'll show up to this event, and you can just start to kind of get yourself into that world little by little. That's my advice.
Thank you, Jamie. And Marinelle, would you have any input on that question about how to get started as a climate activist? Are there any trainings or skills that you need to learn, and how did you do it?
Yeah, I will just add on to what Jamie have said. And for me, also, it is important to start with yourself, because you can really just give the energy to other people if you really believe that what you are fighting for is really worth fighting for. I mean, you are walking the talk, because sometimes we just our friends and our family just follow whatever we do. Sometimes if they see that there is a great outcome of the things that we're doing, then they just follow. I never even pushed my parents or my family and friends to do climate activism, but here they are, seeing me in this field. Here they are also signing up in a lot of youth strikes, and a lot of petition signing, and a lot of climate activism action. And you can really see how you influence other people. And I really echo with what Jamie have said, that it doesn't have to be grand. You just have to start with yourself, with your family, and then things will just go through. It is very important, however, to have people who have the same passion and energy as you have, because as I have said earlier, this advocacy can be so tiring, can be depressing, can be, sometimes we are on the edge of giving up, and we sometimes always question ourselves. But as I have said earlier, we have to go back to our why and our support system. The people that has the same advocacy and the same passion could really push you to not stop, because they are also doing something. And after a disappointing event, there could be a winning event. And that is something that we should look forward to, because at the end of the day, what matters most is what we do for the earth, not really how many recognition that we get from other people. Because honestly, other people's opinions, other people's judgment on what we are doing doesn't really matter, because we are fighting for the earth, not for the judgment of other people.
Wow, thank you for that. And I just want to thank you both so much for joining us and for sharing your stories, for sharing your time, your wisdom. We couldn't be more grateful. And I know that everyone here has learned a lot from you both. So thank you so much for being with us. And thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you, and that if anyone wants to stay in touch after this, or I didn't get to your question, or you just want to connect about anything, I put my email in the chat. It's jamie@thisiszerohour.org. And if you want to, I post a lot about like different events and initiatives and things happening. So if you also want to stay in touch on social media, you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter. It's just Jamie Margolin. And if you want more in-depth like tips and a guide of like how to write a press release, organize a march or a strike or a protest, or get your activism in the media, or like guides on how to really the concrete details. I have it right here. Accidentally dropped something. My book Youth to Power goes into it, and it has a foreword by Greta Thunberg, and the website in that I just put, www.youthtopowerbook.com, is where you can get it if you would like to read it. It's translated in a few languages, but unfortunately it's still not in Spanish, which makes me really mad, because I'm like, why? Like my family can't even read it. But that's out of my control. That's up to the publisher. But anyway, that's how you can stay in touch with me. And I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of your busy days to come here and listen and share your questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you both so much. And yeah, I know we're going to remember this day. So thank you. And yeah, let's be in touch.
Bye.
All right. Bye. Bye-bye. Everyone can wave.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Marinelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to transition into some brief breakout rooms. We'll just have some time to kind of think through the questions that I posted in the Google Classroom and just have an open conversation really about our thoughts on climate justice, climate advocacy, what that maybe looks like where you live, what's been happening in the climate movement where you live, and just, you know, what types of activism maybe we could explore that might be effective moving forward. And also what, you know, kind of integrate some of the wisdom and the teachings that we've just learned from these two incredible activists. So we'll take time to do that in our groups now. I'm going to send us into our breakout. So
I remember everything we spoke about. We had this debate around whether or not we target like older populations or small powerful individuals in government, which might be like for me over here, it'll be my local party leader from my area, either targeting those people or the government as a whole, like down in London. So it was we had this debate around that, and it was very interesting learning about how like people would either choose to tackle the big powerful people in London or tackle it at a local level. And I think both of those, we kind of like, I thought anyway, that both of those have a role to play in fighting for our future. You know, they're both very powerful people, whether or not it's local or not, that every action will add up eventually. And yeah, I think that may have covered most things for me. If anybody else wants to add anything, feel free.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for that. Could we hear from Gabby's group?
I'm going to go ahead and ask if Maria Paula wants to share.
Yes. Okay, in our group, we were discussing about a few questions, exactly the two first one, because we were talking about the meaning of climate justice and climate actions. Maybe maybe must not be just a thing, or I forget the word, like, yeah, we have to take those ideas and to make it real in actions. For example, in our daily life, when we were shopping, when we were choosing our clothes, when we were discussing with our community, it's important to think that this is climate justice, and we can do, yes, a big change with small steps. And about the talks, that the ideas that that we learned a lot about them. It's that the experience that Marinelle has in her community allows her to start this journey. And Daniel, for example, spoke about the importance of not forget who you are throughout this journey, because we are going to face sometimes difficulties or problems, and so we have to be stronger to continue. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Maria. It's really cool to be able to hear from the groups what you said. And I wish we could stay on and hear from everyone. I really appreciate all of you so much, and I want to let us go as close to time as possible. But we're looking forward to a climate advocacy workshop on Saturday. where we'll actually get to, like Maria said, put some things into practice. So practice, what does it actually look like to use some of these skills, these ideas that we've been hearing about from speakers, and take those actions and spend more time again in our group so that we can exchange ideas as well. And as I said, look forward to that the community hour in the WhatsApp chat. This is a completely optional event. It's just a chance for us to spend more time together and get to know each other even better and even have some fun. So looking forward to seeing you all on Saturday, and thank you as always. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, you guys.
Bye, everyone.